This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Turn down for what? NBA primetime on Saturday night has officially begun, and already we have been smacked with the goodness between the Spurs and the Cavaliers. What an awesome way to kick off the premiere of a Saturday primetime. So that means that NBA hype is in full gear. We are fully vested in what's happening now in the association. So to discuss all that's going on, you know I got to roll out the red carpet from my brother from another mother, my right-hand man, 50 grand, owner, runs things, holds it down for www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man Warren Shaw repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. What did you think about Saturday night's premier game between the Spurs and the Cavaliers?
What everybody thought. It was an amazing start to a great product that the NBA, ABC, and ESPN have put together. Those Saturday night specials are just amazing. Every game seems to be on point, and having that game go into overtime and just the way it went down and Spurs winning that on the road, just great basketball. And I can't wait to see what they do for the rest of the season on Saturday night. But as always, salute to all our fans and listeners of the NBA Baseline, and have another great show on tap. It's mid-season time, y'all. So it's a lot to discuss. We have another great guest coming on the show.
Definitely. We have our mid-season awards ready to get on top of and break down and discuss. And to do that, we have our special guest who will be joining us in a few moments, our man, Chris Morrison from the Hoopers Log. You can catch the Hoopers Log, one of the premier NBA podcasts happening on NBALeague.com. We'll be discussing those and a few other really heavy topics that's happening as well in the association. And also on the drop, we will be giving you our all-star reserves picks. I know that the all-star starters have been selected, but we're going to give you our predictions of who we think is deserving to be considered as an all-star reserve. And of course, we have our coveted Coast to Coast where we discuss all things happening in the association. Once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, Google Music, the Roku channel. We're also available on NBALeague.com. So be sure to download or go to any of these platforms and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the NBA. Big shout out to our people Freeman and Fox, the Sports Brothers. They are available Monday through Friday. They host one of the premier sports shows, and we give them the goods discussing the NBA. So we're simulcasted through them. And also shout outs to 16 Wins a Ring. Be sure to check out the new website that covers great NBA content. The NBA Baseline will be premiering on that as well too. So shout out to our peoples from the 16 Wins a Ring website. So be sure to head all of these resources. We're on board and we're all over it. So we want you to be all over it as well too. Download those platforms and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the NBA. You know how we do, and you know what time it is. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
I
down.
break it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Cali, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. This week on the breakdown, topic of conversation, midseason awards. Now, everyone assumes that the midseason is around NBA All-Star Weekend, but we do it legitimately by the number of games. We do it by the math. And so to make sure that we have appropriated the right amount of critique and criticism and evaluation necessary to allot these people deserving of such awards, we had to make sure that we brought in the right people, the right person for the job. And to do that, we got our man. He represents one of the hottest podcasts that's going on right now. It's the Hoopers Log. You can catch it on NBALeague.com. Our man, Chris Morrison. Chris, thanks for hopping aboard with us this week, man.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about some midway portion of the NBA season.
Well, the first thing that I want to do with you, Chris, is before you kind of lead into who we believe should be deserving of these particular awards. And every single year, Sean and myself, we love doing this. We love kind of getting into that conversation and looking at the halfway point and really just evaluating the season halfway as a whole. What are your interpretations of what you've seen thus far? So, from the halfway point of this season, what really stands out to you, minus the people that we're selecting in the awards, but just as far as the NBA in general?
Well, when it comes to headlines, one of the things I mentioned in my halfway portion of the season I mentioned something back about a month and a half ago about the Utah Jazz, and they are coming on the forefront as one of those teams that I don't think you want to mess with now or in the future. I mean, Rudy Gobert just went off for 25 points, 25 rebounds. He's scary. That team is really starting to come together right now. Another thing as well is all four of those bottom teams in the West, as of right now, as we record, with Denver at 8, Memphis at 7, and Oklahoma City 6, Utah 5. All four of those teams, Oklahoma City a year ago, obviously with Kevin Durant, were sensational. Memphis Grizzlies are slowly starting to come around. They're not playing great as of now, but from the standpoint of big man depth, they're insane. And the Denver Nuggets, they might be one of those few teams that could actually challenge Golden State down low in the paint. They're not going to win in a series, but it seems like the West, from an overall perspective, is starting to slowly churn itself out. And that's one of the main things I've noticed, is that the 8th seed on up through the West is starting to really start to shape itself out.
Yeah, one of the things I agree. One of the things that, as far as I consider the bottom feeders, so to speak, but because they are feasting on the hype that they're not as competitive. But we've seen how it plays, that when you bring teams like the San Antonio Spurs, the Golden State Warriors, and even the Los Angeles Clippers, who for the most part have been the upper echelon teams representing the Western Conference, they have found it difficulty, not just from a matchup perspective, but also the emergence of some of these, kind of middle tier stars now kind of making a name for themselves. Guys like Boogie Cousins, guys like, CJ McCollum, and even to your point, Rudy Gobert. These guys are now starting to emerge themselves and play big time in these critical games. Marc Gasol, when healthy, can make that argument for most people who always say, like Draymond Green did, that Boogie Cousins is the best big man in the game. But then when you see some of the performances that Marc Gasol puts on against the best competition, it always kind of puts it right back in perspective of why we keep talking about teams like the Memphis Grizzlies as being one of those dangerous teams that the upper echelon teams do not want to play for. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I know everybody's been anticipating who are we going to be dishing out these awards to. So let's go ahead and start from the bottom up. Chris, who do you have listed as what we consider your MIP, your most improved player in the midseason point?
I don't know how you don't give it to a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo. This guy, we've all talked about his hype. We've all hyped him up. We've all hyped about how good this guy can be. And we're seeing it before our very eyes. We're watching the garden grow as we talk. And we're seeing Giannis Antetokounmpo turn into the guy that we've all aspired to want him to see. And he's only, 22, 23 years old. This guy is turning into the LeBron-like figure that we all anticipated. And also factor in something. I just want to make this clear to everyone who's listening to this podcast. Please, national radio hosts, for the love of God, please start saying his name correctly. Don't just pretend like you don't know his name. Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's how you say his name. Now, you can go Giannis, you can say it other factors, but don't butcher it. Don't intentionally butcher it just because your national audience doesn't know his name. This is a bad man. He's starting in the All-Star game for a reason. He's just lethal from all ends of the court. Every single night, his box score is LeBron-like. It's not as dominant as LeBron or as impactful team-wise, but he is the most improved player in the league by my account.
Yeah, I have to follow up with that and definitely agree with you. I don't know how you would pick anybody but him. I mean, there's some nice guys out there, and this is one of the hardest awards, I think, to pick in a single season, because we always kind of go back and forth. Is it kind of like the comeback player of the year, or is it really the guy who's just actually most improved and who got better? And then sometimes it's a natural progression, or is it because the person is just getting more minutes and all that? But I don't think you can look at Giannis and say, no, he's not the most improved player. You can make a case, for second and third votes for even guys on his own team like Jabari Parker. I think that's somebody who's stepped up as well too. But even a guy like Rudy Gobert, who we talked about a little bit earlier, all those guys have been improved. But by far and away, it has to be Giannis who would get my vote as well.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to disagree with you there. And we can throw out guys like Devin Booker. We can throw out a litany of names. You could even put maybe even, again, CJ McCollum back into the mix, because he's scoring even more than he did the previous season when he won.
Zach LaVine?
Yeah, Zach LaVine. So there's a lot of names, but I'm sorry, you're hard-pressed to convince me that the person who leads the team, the basketball team now, in points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks. I mean, like he arguably leads in every conceivable category that you're supposed to have 5 men on a basketball court to play with to assume these roles and positions. He does that all. career high as across the board in everything, 10 points higher than what he averages for his career. And this is just in the halfway point of the season. Who knows what he's capable of doing come the second half of the season when the games really matter most, and Jason Kidd is going to have to be dependent upon him shouldering that team to move forward towards the playoffs. I just think that Giannis Antetokounmpo by leaps and bounds is the most improved player for the Milwaukee Bucks. And it's hard pressed when you look at it, not just from a numbers perspective, but also from what he does for that basketball team, playing the point guard / point forward position, facilitates the basketball. And he's also been money clutch for the Milwaukee Bucks. We've seen this over the last couple of weeks. That guy wants the basketball and he's stepping up his game. So I completely agree with you guys across the board. Let's go ahead and move on over now to the sixth man of the year award. Shaw, I'm gonna start with you. Who do you have as your sixth man of the year to represent for the midseason point?
Yeah, this for me is another one that's tough where you can go a multitude of ways, if you will. And if you've been listening to our show, Cal and I have been having lots of discussion. When it seemed like I wanted to give the award away a little bit earlier on to maybe some early candidates when a guy like Wilson Chandler was playing great basketball for the Denver Nuggets and still is. Lou Williams playing great basketball for the Lakers coming off the bench as well too. But I think this is a guy whose team could get a lot of these awards too. Is going to go for me. It's going to be Eric Gordon from the Houston Rockets. Just think he's just doing so much in a role that really seems to suit him. There's no pressure on him. He just comes in, knows that he has the green light to shoot the ball. He's better off the dribble than people think. He's got a nice array of moves. Can cross guys over. Can go right to left. Can stop and pop as well too. Eric Gordon gets to the lane at times as well too. But because he's got such a great jumper, that's what teams are having a hard time defending him. And playing alongside James Harden, the potential MVP in the league as well too, has done him wonders. So for me, it's EG without a problem.
Chris, what say you?
It's hard not to go with him. I have been thinking about it the last couple of days after my show and after I did my halfway awards. I actually gave it to Zach Randolph, but this is really, like you said, an open award, and I think the leader guy is a guy like Aaron Gordon. But don't look now, but the way Dejounte Murray played last night for the San Antonio Spurs, oh my lord, this guy was unbelievable last night. He might be one of those guys that might jump into that conversation, even a rookie of the year. I know he's not going to get that, but he might jump into that conversation of rookie of the year along with maybe a sixth man or whatnot. Zach Randolph, I just mentioned. Will Barton a year ago was, in my opinion, probably the best sixth man in the game. He didn't get it, and if Denver gets in, maybe he's a conversation pick as well. This is a real open-ended, like you said, Shaw, that this is a tough one. I just think this is a real tough award, but if I had to pick one, I'd say Zach Randolph, just from the standpoint of he gives that depth for Memphis, and every time I look at a box score from him, he's got 20 and 10 off the bench. He's a solid pick, but I can't disagree with a guy like Eric Gordon.
Yeah, both are solid picks, and to me, I think it was going to come down to, both of these guys. And when you look at what Zach Randolph kind of has already adopted himself in that role going back towards the second half of last season and the dynamic that changed. And then you also, add into the fact that head coaches now change. It's no longer Yeager, it's Fizdale, and Fizdale recognizing how much of a value Zach Randolph is, not only preserving that grit and grind play, but I think also opening up more opportunities for him to score the basketball and the versatility that's in play. And him adopting that, to me, says a lot, which now lends more to the argument of why I think Eric Gordon would be considered as a sixth man of the year award. When I just think about the fact that for the longest time, and Sean knows that we've discussed this at length, that I've just stopped believing in the fact that Eric Gordon should be a starting shooting guard because, one, he doesn't stay healthy, so he can't give you the maximum number of minutes. And number two, without the right system or right point guard to facilitate the ball to him, I think too much of the onus and the reason why he's kind of underachieved for most of his career has been simply because of the fact that he's been the lone person to have to shoot the basketball. Now that they've moved James Harden over to the point guard position and he basically comes off the bench, quote unquote, and plays more next to Patrick Beverley more so than James Harden, we're seeing the efficiency of Eric Gordon scoring the basketball. And I think the game slows down for him a whole lot more, and he's reading the game a lot better under Mike D'Antoni than I think I've ever seen him throughout his career. And that is lending to him averaging close to 18 points per game for a basketball team that's truly overachieving at this juncture.
Yeah.
So to me, I would definitely give it to Eric Gordon. But to your point, man, you threw out a couple of prime names, and Zach Randolph, honorable mentions, no question, the second place finisher, in my opinion. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our discussion, the midseason awards. We're at the midway point with our special guest, Chris Morrison of the Hoopers Log. Be sure to check out the podcast, the Hoopers Log, available on NBALead.com. All right, let's go ahead and push things forward, Shaw. Actually, let me roll it back to you, my brother Chris. Let's go ahead and get right into the Defensive Player of the Year award. So this one I'm really interested in hearing everybody's opinion on. I know I have my personal pick, and it might actually lend to people jumping all over me for it, sever the head or something like Game of
Thrones.
There you go.
Your Nets.
My show from last week, right? I'm really curious to find out from you, Chris. Who do you have selected as your defensive player midseason?
I am known as a big-time San Antonio Spurs fan. In the last 2 years, this guy's won the award, and I think he's going to win it again, just based on the fact that last night was another instance that this guy is just all over the basketball court and tremendously helps his team defensively, and that's Kawhi Leonard. He has his offensive, we take for granted how good his defense is because his offense over the years has just improved, and now it's getting to a point where offensively he's so dynamic that defensively I think we still ignore just how unbelievable this guy is on the defensive side of the floor. And you made the point though there, Cal, that honestly, Defensive Player of the Year, this could go to many. This is probably the most exciting award for me coming up in April when they start announcing these awards, or in June when they give out that award show, which they're going to have at the end of the season. But this is going to be the most exciting one for me because, honestly, I think Kawhi is the leader in the clubhouse. But let me tell you something. With a back nine left in the golf world, for those of you that understand that analogy, on the back nine of the course, there are guys like Patrick Beverley, I think even Tony Allen. I think there's some other guys out there that have serious consideration for Defensive Player of the Year. But if I had to pick one right now, it'd be Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong ever going when you pick Kawhi. And Kawhi is one of the best defenders out there in the league. I think some cold water's been thrown on Kawhi's fire. I think earlier in the year when Matt Moore of CBS wrote an article about how the Spurs were not playing well with Kawhi on the floor defensively, which, again, he brought up the analytics and made some good examples, but I think the eye test is going to say, listen, Kawhi needs to be out there, and he's one of the best defenders out there, and I have no problem with that. But my pick is actually going to be the same guy that I picked in the preseason, and I'm still going to go with Draymond Green for that award. Still has a 99 defensive rating, which is good for 11th overall in the league. Still very, very versatile in terms of who he can guard for the Golden State Warriors, guarding forwards, guarding bigs as well too. Even if he gets switched out on pick and roll, he has enough mobility to be able to stay with some of those guys at times and just make it difficult for them, and it's very physical too. So my pick is going to be Draymond Green. I love Kawhi as well too, but I think maybe the dark horse, and I don't know, hope I'm not seeing my boy Cal Stunner here, but Rudy Gobert has to get some consideration as well too.
Sure.
My pick is Draymond.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert definitely gets some considerations, but like I said, the person that I'm going to actually throw out there, I'm sure that I'm going to get the head severed for making this pick. But right now, midseason award, man, and Shaw, I would have been with you at the very beginning of the season because I think I picked Draymond Green as well too.
No, you picked Whiteside.
Did I say Isaiah Whiteside as Defensive Player of the Year?
No, he said Hassan.
Oh,
Whiteside.
Hassan Whiteside. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I was about to say Whitehead. Whitehead. I was like, not yet. Isaiah Whitehead. He's got a little ways to go before that ever happens. Maybe like never in his career. But I'm going with Kevin Durant. And listen, I know, Shaw, don't lambaste me for it. Listeners, don't lambaste me for it. But just hear me out for a moment. Can you not make an argument for Kevin Durant to not be in the conversation for being Defensive Player of the Year? He has a 101 defensive rating, which I'm sure is like, 2 percentage points behind Draymond Green. He leads the team in blocks. He's among one of the NBA leaders in blocks. He averages 1.6 steals per game while still maintaining scoring somewhere close to 30 points per night. When I look at, and to your point, to your credit, Shaw, I think part of the enamoration of Steve Kerr and their front office not running as quick as they can to try and trade or move to get a front court presence, rim protector type player is because they're using the versatility of Kevin Durant and what he is doing now. He may not be a physical big down there, but he is intimidating nonetheless. And also given the fact that his length is offering a better defensive perimeter on teams that shoot the three-point shot about as equally good as the Golden State Warriors. Now, is this going to happen on a night in, night out basis throughout the rest of the season? Who knows? But if we're just talking about mid-season, and I don't know if the steam is going to run out anytime soon with Kevin Durant, but given what I have seen, and we're just talking mid-season, I would actually give the Defensive Player of the Year award to Kevin Durant because nobody saw what we've been seeing from Kevin Durant this first half of the season coming by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, well, hold on now. So I have no problem with KD being amongst the conversation, if you will. I think even Anthony Davis, even Giannis, who we talked about earlier, all those guys could be in the conversation. And even, maybe even jumping ahead, I don't know if you have time to get to it. I have Durant on one of my all defensive teams, no doubt, because he's locked in. But I don't know, my dude, because if there's one knock you've had on the Warriors all season long, it's the fact that you think they don't play enough defense. And here we're talking about Draymond Green and Kevin Durant, two the guys on their team, two starters on their team, two all-stars on their team, talking about Defensive Player of the Year award. So it kind of throws me a little bit that you're willing to give Durant that award when you think the team in general doesn't play enough defense, and they have two of the best guys playing defense in the NBA.
Well, yeah, you're exactly correct, Shaw. You're exactly correct because of the fact that I think that when it comes to the team playing defensively, they're not playing as solid but again, Defensive Player of the Year award, and you can make of it as you will, because I'm sure we're going to have the same kind of argument about when we say MVP award. Is Defensive Player of the Year award also constituting about how a team plays collectively defensively better? Then why aren't we selecting someone, say, from the Atlanta Hawks, or why are we not selecting anyone from the Los Angeles Clippers at the time that the Los Angeles Clippers had the best defense across the NBA? I'm just saying, from an individual perspective, Kevin Durant could equally make the same argument, and actually, to me, more so, I think has been more dependable defensively for the Golden State Warriors to offset the duties that Draymond Green has had. But to your point, I get completely where you're coming from, and it's easy. Look, I'm willing to put my head on the chopping block for that. I didn't say that the Golden State Warriors are the best defense in the NBA. It would be nice to see Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and whoever, and Zaza Pachulia, and the guys collectively play better defense. But when we're talking about individual defensive performances, I mean, look, man, that's the reason why it's a tough sell for me, because I'm saying this team really could play better defense than what we're exhibiting when we only see it during certain parts of an NBA basketball game and not for the full 4 quarters.
All right.
Yeah, Cal, to chime in on that Defensive Player of the Year pick, honestly, I don't have a problem with it, especially with what we've seen here over the last week with the Golden State Warriors. I mean, they just crushed Cleveland, and every single time in the first quarter of that game that Kyrie Irving tried to drive the rack, Kevin Durant was the one that switched out on him. And every time he tried to go, Kevin Durant's Spider-Man arms found a way to get Kyrie Irving out of his rhythm and trying to drive to the rack. That's huge. I mean, if you got a guy like Kyrie Irving driving to the hole and Kevin Durant's there to stop him like twice, 3 times in that first quarter, that's all you need to know right there. If he can stop guys on the perimeter like he did against Kyrie Irving, like he did against Russell Westbrook the other night, like he did against James Harden in the same week against 3 of the best players in the league handling the basketball, if he does this for the rest of the season, it's hard not to at least consider him. So I don't actually think that's a crazy pick. And I did a podcast the other night, real quick. I did a podcast the other night with one of my buds who was with me last year when I was on the Hoopers log, and we talked about the improvement of Kevin Durant on defense when he was on Oklahoma City and how he shut down Kawhi Leonard in the semifinals of the Western Conference against the Spurs. So I think it's not too outlandish to think that Kevin Durant's improvement on the defensive side of the floor could impact him and allow him to get votes for that position as the Defensive Player of the Year. So I don't think it's that too crazy to say that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shaw. Go ahead.
My final point on all of this is I'm not even ripping the decision to select Kevin Durant or to put him in the conversation, but you cannot continue to say the Warriors don't play defense if they have 2 of the best defenders in the league on their team. Okay. And every time we talk, and as we're recording the show, they're first in defensive rating.
Right. Okay.
That's my only thing. You can't say the Warriors don't play defense.
I want to make sure that I am crystal clear in what I am saying here. That I didn't say that the Golden State Warriors are not a good defensive basketball team. I think I've said this like numerous times. I said But the problem that I see with this basketball team when it comes to and we'll go back to the 4 games that they gave up to the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll even talk about what happened when they had a 14-point lead against the Cleveland Cavaliers. When in numerous times during the course of this season, this basketball team, as much as they've scored 70-something points, they've allowed basketball teams who really have no business scoring 50, 60 points in a half. They do that because they're so offensive conscientious. If they play the kind of defense that they are capable of 2 years ago, they will be the best team, no question, hands down. So to your point, Shaw, I completely agree with you. How can you not say that the Golden State Warriors don't play defense when you have 2 premier now defenders, and then you also have one we don't mention in Klay Thompson? But again, I come back to the point about me saying I didn't say that their defense was horrible, horrendous. I'm just saying that they don't play the type of defense that got them to the championship. It was as dominant as I thought that they were last year. I think they got by because they were so offensively good last year. But when their defense needed to clamp down on the best players in the game, they didn't do it. And to Chris's point, my point about Kevin Durant is exactly what LeBron James did to Steph Curry in the finals last year. Whenever Steph Curry wanted to get to the paint, wanted to do what he wanted to do, LeBron James played like in football, the spy. And that's exactly what the Warriors didn't have. They couldn't ask of that for Draymond Green because he had to assume the front court responsibilities. But now that you have a stretch player like a Kevin Durant who has got the length and who has got the versatility to spy on those penetrations by J.R. Smith, by Kyrie Irving, and anyone else who's trying to get into the paint. Now it makes those shots that the Cleveland Cavaliers were getting at ease much more difficult. And to me, that's why I'm saying he would be more deserving of Defensive Player of the Year award mid-season, because I didn't think that he was capable of doing this now, as I would probably think that he would do it in the second half of the season when they get accustomed to each other and get acclimated to what they're trying to do defensively.
Okay, let's move on.
I know he ain't buying it. I know my man ain't buying it. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. We are discussing midseason awards with our guest, Chris Morrison, who represents the Hoopers Log. Be sure to check out our man, Chris Morrison, and his awesome podcast on NBALead.com. All right, Shaw, let me get from you who you've got slated as your Rookie of the Year.
Joel Embiid. There's nothing more to say. There's just nothing more to say. I mean, and if he would have played last season, 2 years ago, whatever it was, then this race would be extremely open. But the rookies are more or less terrible this year. So I think only discussion we're going to need to have here is really who would be the runner-up. And I think that would probably be Malcolm Brogdon. You could argue maybe Brandon Ingram is stepping in there. Maybe Dejounte Murray's now coming up. Jamal Murray's also had some nice moments in this season, but he healed every now and then, decides to play every 5 or 6 games. But right now, Joel Embiid is the hands-down Rookie of the Year. You can't even make any case for anybody else, and I don't want to hear it.
I'm sorry. Did you just lay the smack down? That's like you just drew the line in the sand? It's
if he doesn't win this with a unanimous vote, assuming he stays healthy the entire year, then there's something up. You know what I mean? I don't know how any reporter or any media type out there could not vote for him, even if you're not from that market. This is hands down running away by far, probably the largest landslide maybe since LeBron has been in the league that we've seen, something like this happen with the Rookie of the Year race. Chris, what do you think?
So here's my thing. I'm not going to be a homer. Well, I am going to be a homer. I agree with you. First of all, Joel Embiid's going to win it, because if he doesn't, then I'm going to stop covering the NBA. But what I'm trying to say is the guy who's going to finish second is the way he played last night. And again, I know I live out here in the Pacific Northwest. I know I'm a Spurs fan, so this is all going to be homer. But Dejounte Murray, the way he played last night, that was baby Tony Parker. That was Derrick Rose back in his day type performance last night for a rookie who's never played in a big spotlight game in his life. Came out and played against the Cavs, against the defending champions, and played like a guy who was a part of one of the greatest systems in sports history. I mean, he was unbelievable. He fit right in. His athleticism was sensational. I think when it comes to a guy who's going to be a runner-up to Joel Embiid, Dejounte Murray may just run right into it, because Tony Parker is a guy now coming off the bench who's going to be a third-string type guy off the bench, and then you got a guy in Patty Mills, as we all know, can start for this team but Dejounte Murray might be the starter moving forward with the way he played last night. I mean, he really did impact that game to a large degree because nobody was expecting him to do what he did. And if he does that for the rest of the season for the San Antonio Spurs, there might be a change of the conversation coming into the postseason if Dejounte Murray is on Steph Curry in the Western Conference Finals, because Dejounte Murray's got length, he's got ability to float the ball, and he's a guy who's scary. And if he can perform like that for the Spurs later on, I know it's only one game, but if he does it for a consistent basis throughout the rest of the season, he might be stepping into that second place Rookie of the Year conversation. He might be one of the better players for the Spurs moving forward.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you with that sentiment, but there's no question that it's going to be Joel Embiid. Unfortunately,
Right.
and the reason why is, when you look at it, he's only played 22 games, okay? And he's only averaging around 8 minutes per game. So unfortunately, there's no resume for us to be able to make that true assessment in comparison to even Joel Embiid, who's at least played a minimum of 22 minutes per game. And clearly, he is the go-to person. He gets the basketball. And now that they finally unleashed him, let go of these minutes restrictions, and this Sixers team, I can't even believe that I'm even saying this too, but listen, the process has certainly made some form of progression. This is a basketball team that has their eyes set on trying to make that 8th seed in the NBA playoffs, which now even exacerbates the need for Joel Embiid and him being an intricate part to that basketball team being successful. So when I think about that to me is going to kind of go against Dejounte Murray as far as his ability to getting those necessary looks that I think is necessary. And then the other thing too is, man, Greg Popovich, as much as I love this guy, and he is the greatest, coach of all time, sometimes he just does the rooks dirty, man. He does. I mean, maybe it's because he loves Tony Parker to a fault, but there are these moments where we were talking about Jonathan Simmons at the beginning of the year being a possible 6th man of the year after the explosion he had on the Golden State Warriors. And look at where he's now. He's kind of completely fallen off the face of the earth. And so I say the same thing with Murray. He's young. He definitely has a bright future ahead because clearly they're going to have to turn the page from Tony Parker. I just don't know if it's going to be in time for him to get the considerations and nods to be the Rookie of the Year. All right, we got 2 more left to go here. All right, time to pull up the big man pants. Shaw, I'm going to throw it back to you. Who do you have listed as your Coach of the Year midseason?
I think every single season this award is one of my hardest to pick because a lot of times it's the same thing. What is the actual criteria? Is it the guy who's trained his players and got his players to that next level? Is it the guy who's coached his team to the best overall record in the NBA? And I always shun maybe those elite coaches like the Popoviches, and now I guess you can put Steve Kerr into that conversation as well too. Because it's like, all right, you've seen it, you're done with it already. It gets to be, and I always like guys who've maybe coached their teams up to a level that we wouldn't necessarily have expected. And for me, I'm going to go with Mike D'Antoni for the Houston Rockets. I still think like this. Again, this is midseason. This Rockets team is not nearly as good as, they're doing a lot better than I thought they would have, and I think most people would have thought they would have. If you would have said, I think there was the stat that they won their 33rd game of the year last year. They didn't win their 33rd game until March sometime last season. So looking at this Rockets team and what Harden has done, what Daryl Morey has done in putting this team together, and all the questions and all the concerns we had coming in, D'Antoni doesn't play any defense. There's no way Harden going to full-time point guard. What's that going to do? What's it going to look like? Eric Gordon, Ryan Anderson, all these guys are all hurt. It's worked, and it's worked amazingly. And this Rockets team is one of the best in the Western Conference, one of the best in the NBA currently. And I don't see how D'Antoni wouldn't be able to get this award if we're talking about midseason.
I'm still pissed about last season, guys. I still don't know how the hell Terry Stotts didn't win Coach of the Year. Do you see this Portland Trailblazers team? They're giving up 110 points a game. They got 19 wins and 27 losses. This is exactly what we all saw from Portland, what we should have expected to see from Portland last season when they lost LaMarcus, Batum. They lost all those other stars, Wes Matthews, and then they lost Robin Lopez to Chicago, I believe. When you lose 4 or 5 starters, you're going to drop off the map. Obviously, C.J. McCollum stepped up and played well. Damian Lillard turned into the freak we all know he is today. But this is exactly what we expected from the Portland Trailblazers. And we thought them last year doing what they did, it wasn't going to be possible. And Terry Stotts should have won it by that perspective alone. I agree with you. I think Mike D'Antoni, just from the standpoint of the Houston Rockets and where they are, it's unexpected. But let me keep this open-minded for everyone to go forward throughout the rest of the season. The Clippers don't have Blake Griffin for another couple weeks. The Clippers don't have Chris Paul for 2 months. And if this Clipper team can find a way to stay in that middle portion of the Western Conference and maybe even leap up one, which I don't think we see as a possibility, but if they can with that, if they got Maurice Spates starting at the 4 and you got Austin Rivers at the 1, and you got this team playing the way they're playing, and if they can find a way to just mold it together and make it work, I don't know how Doc Rivers doesn't win Coach of the Year. The Utah Jazz, they have completely revamped their team, and they're looking sensational. Quinn Snyder needs to get some conversation piece for that. And also, if the Denver Nuggets can get into the postseason and find a way to be competitive, I don't know how Mike Malone doesn't get it. So you do have a lot of conversation pieces there in the Western Conference for guys. And what about that coach for the Charlotte Hornets? I don't know his name, but if this team keeps playing the way they're playing, if they can finish in the 4th spot, they might be in conversation as well. So yeah, the Coach of the Year is wide open for what I'm concerned.
Yeah, Steve Clifford, to me, he's done a great job, albeit this team is somewhat been on the skids over the last couple of weeks. So it would be difficult for me to give it to him mid-season, and that's what we're talking about here is mid-season. There is only 2 people that I can think of right now that would be deserving of this award, and then narrow it down to the 1. You brought him up just a moment ago, Chris. I think Quinn Snyder has done a fabulous job. And when we talked about this in the preview of this upcoming season, we were talking about how my prediction was that the Portland Trailblazers would be the best team in the Northwest, Oklahoma City Thunder second,
yeah, me too.
and then the Utah Jazz, even though the Utah Jazz were expected to be in the playoffs. Well, when we look up now, in the standings, it's the Utah Jazz is the best team out of the Northwest Division, and they have had some impressive victories against above 500 basketball teams. With that being said, listen, nobody expected the Houston Rockets to be doing what they're doing right now, which is trying to run with the San Antonio Spurs out of the Southwest Division. We had this as probably the 3rd worst or second to last team in this division, and they have 34 wins already, and they're already on pace to hit 50. We weren't even expecting these guys to get maybe barely push 45 wins. So what this Houston Rockets team has been able to achieve at this moment in time, the move by D'Antoni to move James Harden to the point guard position, to slot Eric Gordon out as the 6th man. I mean, and then to get the contributions that they're getting after offloading Dwight Howard, Montrezl Harrell, and Nene coming off the bench. When they signed Nene, I thought he was going to be a starter for that basketball team. D'Antoni's got him coming off the bench, and yet this basketball team is still winning. To me, I feel like there's no question. Mike D'Antoni, Coach of the Year, but very, very strong considerations for Quinn Snyder and that Utah Jazz basketball team simply because they've got their team number 1 in the Northwest Division. All right, let's go ahead and round off the discussion, fellas. You know how we do it, man. We got to do it big time. So this now goes MVP. So, Chris, I'm rolling out the red carpet to you, my friend. Who do you have as the MVP midseason?
That carpet better be red because it better be James Harden with all the first place votes. This guy, you just talked about it with the Houston Rockets and the way that D'Antoni has found a way to implement his system. Look, we talk about Steve Nash and what he did in the mid-2000s, winning back-to-back MVPs with Mike D'Antoni as his head coach. James Harden is Steve Nash on crack. I mean, I hate to use drugs as a reference, but that's what he is. I mean, James Harden, we all saw Russell. We all know what Russell Westbrook's doing right now, and he's been absolutely incredible. And the conversation about him winning MVP is definitely there and legit. But James Harden, look, every single night they need a big performance from him. He gives it. Every night they need him to slow it down. He does it. Every night they need him to be a distributor. He does it. He pushes all the right buttons in the perspective and the viewpoint of what we need in an MVP. That's James Harden. He's the definition of an MVP. But like I said, Russell Westbrook, the conversation there is definitely warranted. And even Kawhi Leonard, with what he's done over the last 6 games, he's scored 30-plus points in the last 6 straight games for this team, for San Antonio. I have never seen a stretch like that in my life as a San Antonio Spurs fan, and I've watched pretty successful basketball over my entire life, and he's been absolutely incredible. And also Kevin Durant, LeBron James. There's actually a whole bunch of slew of guys who could be in that MVP conversation, but if you had to have one choice, James Harden is I think he's just the most obvious in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm not going to dispute that at all. I think you mentioned all the other guys too, LeBron, KD. Isaiah Thomas, I think, has to get some votes.
Yeah.
Consideration as well too. And the only way that I see Harden losing this right now is if somehow the Rockets actually do fall back to earth a little bit, and maybe the Oklahoma City Thunder pick it up. So I'm in a situation now where I just can't believe, and I think I even tweeted it out, where we're going to have Westbrook not be an all-star starter, and he may not win the MVP in the same year, averaging a triple-double if he continues on the same path. That to me is lunacy, but that's our reality. And again, I don't have a problem with it, but it's just crazy to think that could happen. And the 2 times in our league where a guy averages a triple-double where they wouldn't get the MVP award because Oscar didn't win it when he averaged, and Wilt Chamberlain got it that year as well. So James Harden, to me, hands down, no question about it. But if the Rockets slip at all and somehow OKC can finish in that 4 or even 5 seed, maybe a couple games behind Houston, then I think that conversation gets a lot more tighter.
Yeah, right now it's James Harden, and it's not just because of the fact that the Houston Rockets are winning a lot more games than the Oklahoma City Thunder. And while I'm ghastly impressed by what Russell Westbrook has done with 21 triple doubles already, and we're not even finished with this season yet. It's awesome. But if you ask me who is the most dangerous and the most explosive basketball player and is helping their basketball team win those games, it's no question James Harden. How many 40-point games has James Harden already amassed this year? I'm not saying that Russell Westbrook probably wouldn't be able to do those things, but if you think about it, that's the problem with trying to average a triple-double. Something is going to be minimized because of it. We've seen Russell Westbrook at stretches where he can explode and score those 40 points. But if he's also rebounding and also passing the basketball and doing all of these other things, it's hard-pressed for me to believe that he can maintain what we've already been seeing from James Harden. And to me, James Harden, while at times he may not look like, he just makes it look so easy. He just really makes it look easy, effortless 45-point games, a 50-point triple-double game. I mean, and it matters because the Rockets win those basketball games. I've seen triple-doubles performed by Russell Westbrook, and the Thunder still lose. So right now, there's no question. I think James Harden is the MVP, but I think that this second half is really going to be telling because if Russell Westbrook continues on the pace that he's continuing on, but it amounts to victories. Some of the historical numbers that are now coming into play because of what Russell Westbrook did in the first half of the season might add on to helping him possibly leapfrog over James Harden. It's hard-pressed to see that because this Thunder basketball team is going to have to improve vastly, so it validates the achievement so far for Westbrook. But right now, there's no question. I just believe that James Harden is definitely deserving of the MVP. Chris, man, I can't believe that we broke down all of these awards and Shaw did not jump on an airplane and hop over and come into Jersey and try to beat me to an oblivion before this was all said and done, brother.
Yeah, man, it's a good time. And, you know, I wanted to add one thing when you mentioned Russell Westbrook. And doesn't LeBron James have like 47 triple-doubles in his career? I mean, think about that. LeBron James could be one of the greatest players of all time. In fact, probably top 5. In my opinion, he's the greatest player of all time, but I can understand why people don't. But he's got like 47 triple-doubles. Look, think about this. Russell Westbrook has 21.
Yep.
And in one season, and he could potentially have 40-something triple. He might have close to the amount of triple-doubles LeBron James would have in his entire career in 1 year in this type of year. I mean, he's on pace for 40 and 35, 40 triple-doubles. He's been sensational. And I've mentioned this multiple times, but what we're seeing in Russell Westbrook right now, and I said this in the offseason, is this is if you want to know what MJ looked like in the mid 80s to late 80s, you're looking at him. This is Russell Westbrook. This is MJ in the early 80s. This is before he jumped into that championship mentality. We're watching it. This is unbelievable stuff from Russell Westbrook, and I agree. I think James Harden's going to win the MVP as of right now, but like you said, but time will tell. And there's a whole bunch of other candidates out there too. Kevin Durant, you even mentioned Isaiah Thomas. He could slip in there to steal some votes. And if Chris Paul comes back after the team's been really bad and he finds a way to get himself in there, he might be in the conversation as well. Kawhi Leonard. There's a bunch of guys out there. But yeah, like you guys said, James Harden definitely up there as the main front runner for now.
All right, man. Well, he is the man. He hosts one of the hottest podcasts rolling right now. It's called The Hooper's Log. Be sure to catch him. The Twitter handle, The Hooper's Log. Our man Chris Morrison, his Twitter handle, @TheRealChrisM13. Part of NBALeague.com, one of the premier digital platforms that covers the NBA. Chris, man, we so much appreciate you hopping on board and helping us break down these midseason awards, brother.
Absolutely, fella. I'd love to talk to you more throughout the season.
All right, most definitely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. This week on The Drop, we are going to break down who we are thinking will be, so this means it's our predictions, who we believe should be deserving of the All-Star reserves. Now, everybody is already aware of the All-Star starters. In the Western Conference, James Harden, Steph Curry, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, they will be starting for the Western Conference All-Stars. So we're going to start with the West first, Shaw. And look, everyone is obviously still fixated on the fact that Russell Westbrook did not get the starter's nod. We don't need to get into the semantics about how the voting system is working or doesn't work. But I think in this particular case, it's hard pressed for us not to say that if Russell Westbrook is not a starter, he damn sure is going to be one of our reserves.
Yeah, that's hands down. I don't think there's going to be anybody to dispute with that. And Russ definitely, again, had him in my starters, but whatever, didn't happen that way. So he's got to be one of the reserves out there. The rest of my list is going to go with DeMarcus Cousins, Karl Anthony Towns, Draymond Green, Marc Gasol, Gordon Hayward, and Chris Paul. So Chris Paul being injured, I have to take a alternate selections. I think this is exactly what the coaches will do. They'll select Paul and then end up replacing him with somebody else. And this is where it becomes interesting because on my list, I have a lot of bigs. But I still think the Clippers need some representation. So I'd probably put another big on this thing and put DeAndre Jordan out there. That means I'm snubbing. I'm snubbing Damian Lillard. I'm snubbing CJ McCollum. And then I'm snubbing even a guy like maybe Jokic from the Denver Nuggets, the team right now who's in the sitting in the 8th seed as we speak and record this podcast. Who you got out there in the West, my dude?
Well, look, I'm somewhat of the more conventional thinking. I do reward the team who has, that's of the best teams in the conference. And so in this case, it's obviously the Golden State Warriors. And we already know that Steph Curry and Kevin Durant would have been a part of this, whether they'd been starters or reserves, but that would have been hard pressed, right? So I do have Klay Thompson listed as one of the reserves, but it was really tough for me because to your point, Shaw, I would have easily had Draymond Green added in there. And I'm thinking you probably would have Draymond Green more so than you would have Klay Thompson. But I also have DeAndre Jordan in there. I think DeAndre Jordan defensively has been putting up remarkable numbers. And I think especially now with the injuries to Blake Griffin and Chris Paul, he's been more so one of the big time players for that Clippers basketball team to maintain them in their position as being one of the top teams in the Western Conference. So, to me, I think he's definitely deserving of a nod. And look, there's no question. Karl Anthony Towns, DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, those are big time players. I think more so I leaned on bringing Klay Thompson on board is because he's still one of the best 3-point shooters in the game. He's still one of the better two-way defenders, two-guard defenders, for the Golden State Warriors. So I just, it's hard for me to leave him out there, even though technically his numbers are down when he played at an all-time high come last year. Listen, this is still the same dude earlier this year that dropped 27 points in a quarter. Listen, it's Klay, man. It's Klay all day. But to your point, Shaw, I also had CJ McCollum as a sub-in for Chris Paul. I think CJ McCollum has played phenomenally well, especially during that stretch when Damian Lillard was out. And even though the Blazers have definitely underachieved, I think maybe that is partly to the reason why I could definitely see guys like that you put in there, Marc Gasol or Gordon Hayward, getting the nod.
I think I just same thing to your point where I want to reward winning to some degree, and I can't see the Utah Jazz that we talked about a little bit earlier in the show with Chris, where you have them being a 4 seed currently, maybe even 5 seed, whatever, that they can't get a guy in. It has to be one of them. So Gordon Hayward.
But what's so funny though, Shaw? What's so funny to me is that can you really say that they have kind of like, all right, like Gordon Hayward or maybe even Rudy Gobert have head and shoulders, stood amongst the pack? Like, to me is what really was killing me, is that I wanted to select someone, but where they're positioned at for their respective positions amongst other players. And I'm looking at just the dynamic across the fold. It's so difficult for me to choose between a Gobert or between a Hayward. I know both of them are not going to be getting in there, and neither one have really like stood out to say that they've been superstar all-stars. Like, you know what I'm saying? So that to me is what got me more than anything.
Right. But I think that, again, not to belabor it, but then I think that would negate Klay's position in this as well, too. Klay is clearly, the third option offensively on this team. And yes, he plays both ways. But if you already have Curry and Durant in there, then you have to argue, okay, well, do they really need 4 guys to get in there when there's other teams that are playing well in the Western Conference? And that's why I don't know if Klay can get there, especially at that wings position. That's why I put Gordon Hayward there, too. And then I agree with you with the Clippers. I think DeAndre's come on late in these last couple of weeks too, and one way or another, Clipper has to get on there too. So that's where I have that. So my reserves are going to be a little bit more unconventional because it doesn't have as much depth when it comes to the wing position. Gordon Hayward really being the only wing that I would select, and then a bunch of bigs out there, and you basically another point guard in Russell Westbrook, who can, I guess, play some wing position too. So, really interesting out to see how it goes out in the Western Conference. But, I think either way, people are going to get stubbed. Lillard, McCollum, all of them guys, they could all are going to have strong cases, and they're probably going to be pissed off one way or the other come Thursday.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just glad that we're of many podcasts, so they'll have to probably, after they finish listening to everyone else and cussing them out, maybe they'll eventually get to us. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our segment of The Drop, as we have our discussion on the All-Star reserves. Who do you think is going to be a part of the All-Star weekend? We've definitely got our picks for the West, so let's go ahead and transition our picks to the East. Look, Shaw, I felt like Isaiah Thomas was definitely deserving to be an NBA All-Star Eastern Conference starter, but unfortunately that is not the case. In the Eastern Conference, DeMar DeRozan, Kyrie Irving, Jimmy Butler, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and LeBron James have gotten a nod to be the East Coast starters. So from your perspective, Shaw, who do you have listed to be deserving of the reserves for the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, I'm a wild dude. My West roster is all jacked up. My East roster is all jacked up as well, too. So I have primarily a bunch of guards in the East, and I just feel like they need to make it. Isaiah Thomas.
You just wanted to be a guard fest out in NOLA.
Well, for the East side of things, too, because it would be really mismatched because the West side have a bunch of bigs out there. So I got Isaiah Thomas, Kyle Lowry, John Wall, Paul George, Kemba Walker, Paul Millsap, and Kevin Love. I think those guys all kind of have to make it. All those guys have their teams in the playoffs as we speak. That means I'm snubbing a guy like Andre Drummond. It means I'm snubbing a guy like Jabari Parker, Carmelo Anthony, and Kristaps Porzingis, and my dude Joel Embiid, who I'd love to put on this roster as some sort of injury replacement if something were to happen, but I can't see how Millsap from the Atlanta Hawks doesn't get on. I can't see how Kemba doesn't get on another year. I think those guys just have to be on this team.
Listen, man, I really hate the Eastern Conference sometimes. I really do. I despise them because not too long ago, man, the Atlanta Hawks played like pure garbage, okay? Pure garbage. And I was saying to myself, hey, I don't care if Paul Millsap is averaging a triple damn double. I don't know if whether or not he's going to be able to be a part of this Eastern Conference All-Star last year, because I felt like last year when the Atlanta Hawks had like 2-3 guys representing for the Eastern Conference, and we were like, really? They're deserving that many people to be a part of the Eastern Conference All-Stars? I'm sitting to myself, so what has Paul Millsap done that would be deserving to even be a part of the All-Star this year? Because his numbers definitely are not completely depicting of what was a representation of what the Hawks did last year. But look, I'm not going to argue with you on that particular point, y'all, because again, I understand why you would select him. At the time when I came up with my All-Stars, I came up with Thomas. I had Parker as a reserve. I had Kristaps Porzingis, Kevin Love, Kemba Walker, Paul George. And then the Knicks perceivably went on this downward spiral. Kristaps goes injured, right? Kemba Walker and them go skidding off course. Kevin Love gets injured. I mean, they just completely jacked up my damn selections. So I'm going to stay firm with what I selected, albeit, though, if I was on shaky ground and all things considered, how can you not kind of give a nod to Joel Embiid as a possible reserve? Like, he's probably the healthiest of the unhealthy big men that has actually played throughout the course of this half season and has legitimately made the 76ers a contender in the eighth. And everybody knows that he's the best player on the basketball court for the 76ers. So it's a really interesting thing. I can only be certain that I think Parker and I think Thomas is definitely deserving. Paul George definitely deserving. But everyone else.
That's tough, man. I don't see how, and not to challenge you too much, but I can't see how you'd have Jabari on there over John Wall. Like I can't see that, and I really struggle. Well, I'm not saying that
I wouldn't select John Wall. The problem is that it's already guard. Like to me, it's too many guards. So I guess it's how you look at the selection of all stars, right? Like, are we just talking about players? Because then there's no question Kristaps would not be in there over John Wall. No, definitely not. You know what I'm saying? But then you're asking me, do I choose John Wall over Kemba Walker? Is it because to me, while John Wall is playing like fabulous basketball, I mean the Charlotte Hornets were a better basketball team than the Washington Wizards at that particular time frame as well too. So it's tough, man. I think because of over the years, the way that we've looked at how we're supposed to select these guys and who would be deserving and non-deserving, I would love for it to be where it just comes down to the players, because then yours definitely has a lot more credence than mine.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if it's about credence. I think it's that because I'm not going by traditional positions, and I think because some of the starters, they can kind of go both ways and play wings, and you have LeBron, Giannis, and Jimmy Butler out there, DeRozan even. You don't really have to worry about positions as much in the East, but they do need some size. So again, I really struggle with putting Paul George on it.
And listen, the
really
only
down on
reason
Paul
why I'm
George
saying
this
that
year.
too is you still have to win this basketball game.
Yeah. So
Unfortunately.
so if there was somebody who I'd boot off my reserve list, it would be Paul George in a heartbeat, and I'd throw Embiid on there. And I think Paul George has not been the same guy that we would have expected him to be in terms of being an elite ball player. Great article in 16 Wins Ring by our guy Adam Joseph. He talks about how Paul George has fell behind the elite race when it comes to being one of the upper echelon players in the NBA. And again, I agree with everything that's said in that. Paul George is still great, still going to make a lot of money, still going to make a franchise very, very happy whether he stays in Indiana this year or not. But I'm a little on the fence with him, but I still put him on the reserve list nonetheless.
Yeah, listen, a lot of great names. I think it'll be very interesting as well too. We may even have a brief discussion about who does get selected as the all-star reserves. So the names that we've thrown out there, listen, I wouldn't be against whoever it is. I just hope they don't come up with some outlandish names. And I guess I'm more so glad that the selection process itself is definitely not being affected by the fans, given some of the stuff that we've already seen already. But hopefully there will be sound decisions made when the all-star reserves will be selected. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right, Greg Popovich going in not only on President Trump for the inauguration, but also calling out the NBA for only finding assistant coach Sidney Lowe for the Washington Wizards for that incident that took place in the Knicks-Wizards game with Courtney Lee.
Whether you agree with him or don't agree with him, he gives it 100 from his mind, and that's what you have to love about Popovich. Especially with the Sidney Lowe incident, I think that was really distasteful on Lowe's part and the Wizards organization. But interesting that Lee was effective as much as he was. But Pop comes out and tells it from the heart, tells it like it is. And we all know he's not a big Trump guy. He's been saying that ever since the election, before the election. And it's really interesting because I think there's a tweet out there as well too that Popovich is taking these risks while his own owner from the San Antonio Spurs donated, I think it was $250,000 to Trump's campaign. So Popovich going here and speaking out against somebody like that when his own owner supported the president, I think that just goes to show you how much Pop gives a damn about what people have to say about him.
Pop gives a damn and then doesn't give a damn. And this is a note for all you media people who seem to find it hard to get Greg Popovich to say anything in front of you guys. Why don't you just put on a Donald Trump mask? I'm sure that he will get you. He'll definitely keep it 100 with you all the way during the interview. All right, out in Milwaukee, really interesting situation, Shaw. I was just talking about how Jabari Parker should be considered as an all-star reserve. Well, the Milwaukee Bucks and Jason Kidd suspended Jabari Parker for an incident that took place behind the scenes. Apparently, Jabari Parker got called out by several teammates in a players-only meeting. However, during the interview process post-game, he talked about that specific interview, and though because of that, Jason Kidd suspended him, basically violating team rules. What do you think about that regarding Jabari Parker, him being suspended, coming off of the bench, and basically calling out the team that called him out in a players-only meeting?
Young guy making a young mistake. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Jason Kidd is definitely an old school type of guy, understands what the locker room code is supposed to be. Jabari just needed to keep that to himself, even if he didn't like it, keep that to yourself and address your teammates later on, but don't let the media know what's going on behind closed doors in the players' own meeting. I think he's going to learn from it, much like D'Angelo Russell and his mishap with Nick Young last year. These are just young guys still finding themselves a little bit, and I think Jabari will be fine.
Yeah, definitely, but he did say, man, hey, I didn't win in that battle, so kudos for him. He owned it after it was all said and done. Out in San Antonio, unfortunate situation. Paul Gasol out indefinitely. Apparently cracked a finger during warm-ups prior to the game between the Cavs and the Spurs. So he's going to be out indefinitely. Hopefully not anytime soon, but definitely didn't stop Kawhi Leonard from going off on the Cavaliers, winning that big game in overtime.
Yeah, it was in the warm line against the Nuggets, actually. I don't really know what exactly happened, but in the warm line, somehow he broke the fourth metatarsal in his hand. He's going to be out indefinitely, and that's unfortunate news. But they got a guy like David Lee, and they got Dedmon and all those guys ready to step in and play. Again, the Spurs system is complete plug and play. No worries there. Eric Gasol hopefully be back, in time, just a little bit after the All-Star break, perhaps. And the Spurs should be fine going into going into the postseason.
All right, unfortunate situation also out in Sacramento. You know, we were talking about how this guy might be on the trading blocks. Well, he's not going to be worth anybody to anything for the rest of the season. Rudy Gay out for the remainder of this season. Not only is that a big blow to the Sacramento Kings as far as trade bait circumstances, but hey, the Sacramento Kings were a team that was trying to vie for the opportunity to play in the playoffs this season.
Yeah, it sucks for all parties involved. I think even his agent is probably upset now too, because he's going to ruin whatever trade value you had. Don't know if anyone's going to make a move for him. He probably now has to opt into his contract next year. I think it's at 14 or 15 million, and to play and prove that he can come back from his injury. I think he's about 30 years old now or so, so you want to make sure that he's not going to have some ill effects from this as well. So an unfortunate incident for all parties involved. I know he wanted to leave Sacramento, and maybe he still does, but this makes things a lot more difficult for him.
All right, out in Minnesota and also Detroit, the rumors about Ricky Rubio for Reggie Jackson as a possible trade shot down hard by coach Stan Van Gundy. He's basically like, nah, I don't think so. We ain't having that.
Well, Van Gundy is a weird dude, because I think he said that, and then the very next day he's like, yeah, we get offers, we get calls all the time. He's like, everybody's on the table for the right price, but the right price for me isn't always the right price for another team. So in essence, he's just having a little fun with the media out there. I don't think there's anything imminent with that. I think Rubio on the move is more imminent than the actual swap of Rubio and Reggie Jackson. So we'll see what happens in Detroit, but Van Gundy is always an interesting quote guy.
All right, hopefully we can finally move on. Just caught some late breaking news off of Baxter Holmes of ESPN.com. A severe right MCL sprain by D'Angelo Russell for the Los Angeles Lakers, and he is going to be out for about 1 to 2 weeks. How big a blow is that for Luke Walton's Lakers?
Well, I don't know if it's a blow. I think, you want to continue to have Russell develop, and I think from that side of things, it's not good. But this Lakers team, hey, they're tanking. They're trying to get these draft picks. So Russell not being out there can only enhance their ability.
Embracing the tank.
Yeah, can only enhance their ability to get, a better draft pick later on down the line. So unfortunately for Russell, definitely wanted to make some strides this year. I don't think he's been quite as good as people would have hoped. And even I had hoped, and our guy Oliver Maroney would have hoped. But hopefully he can come back pretty quickly from this injury, and it won't be taking him out for the rest of the regular season.
All right, let's move on to some really good news. Congratulations to Chris Paul. He can kick his feet up for a couple of weeks and embrace the fact that he has now moved to 10th all-time in the assists, accomplishing this feat in only 805 games. He now only needs 7,806 assists to pass John Stockton, but good kudos to Chris Paul, right?
Oh, that's light work. He's right on John Stockton's tail there. But nah, Chris Paul is one of those great point guards out there, as they say in the industry, the point guard, and hopefully he can get back.
The point guard.
Yeah, he can get back from this injury really quickly, and get back to putting up those gaudy numbers. And again, I think he has legitimate concerns, if you will, about the Clippers team and whether he's going to be there later on. But as far as his statistical performances, you never have to worry about Chris Paul. Comes to work every day, does his job, and does it well. And again, we just hope to see him back on the court very soon.
You know what I can't wait to see one time? In LA, the energy god with the point guard. That would just be awesome. Jamaica meets North Carolina. I love it. Here we go.
Right.
Signal to plan. Finally, Shaw, I know you were loving this, man, and it's so well deserved and about damn time, man. Anthony Penny Hardaway has been inducted into the Orlando Magic Hall of Fame. I don't know if I'm totally shocked by this, because leave it to your Orlando Magic to wait until the man is basically about to limp and roll up in a wheelchair if they had it their way before giving this man his props. Anthony Hardaway, a part of the Orlando Magic Hall of Fame. Kudos to him.
Absolutely. Penny is one of my favorite players in NBA history.
It should have happened so long ago, though, bro.
But I love that dude, and I just love this game. Definitely one of the guys whose injuries took him away from a potential true Hall of Fame like career. He had all the skills, and it's nice that things didn't end amicably. And back in the day with him, the Orlando Magic, that they can come back now. Even the Saints saw the 30-30 with he and Shaquille O'Neal last year. Things are heading in the right direction. And Penny's had a great career off the basketball court in terms of coaching and doing things in the community in Memphis as well. So kudos to him, and I really salute him on this accomplishment of being inducted to the Orlando Magic Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, man. He was one of my favorite players. I loved the commercials, but this guy was a great basketball player, and he did so many wonderful things. Even post Shaq, he still made that Orlando Magic basketball team a relevant basketball team. He tried to do his thing out in Phoenix as well, too. And unfortunately, the injuries, man. The injuries prevented us from witnessing really one of the greatest guards. He revolutionized, how the guards play at his size, because people did not think that with his size that he could shoot, pass the basketball, and just do the kind of things that made that Orlando Magic basketball team back in the late 90s one of those premier basketball teams to watch. So kudos to him, and I'm finally glad that he finally got his name in the Magic Hall of Fame. Awesome show this week, Shaw. What more can be said? Really had a great time having our man Chris Morrison on board as we discussed the mid-season awards, man. A lot of hot topics, and I'm really sorry, Shaw, man. You know what I'm saying? I never want to upset my brother from another mother like that.
What you mean? We're always good money, man. It is great to have the conversation and go a little bit back and forth and just let everybody understand our different perspectives. And that's what makes the show so dynamic, because you definitely see things in a different way than I do. We don't always have to agree, but at the end of the day, we always produce a great show, and I think that's what the fans and listeners love, man. So no need to apologize to me. No need to apologize to our fans. We have been
because because in the end, you're right. I understand this.
Nah, man, it's like that, homie. Be Gucci. And I think we can agree to disagree, so that makes us both right. And we'll let the fans decide. Who they think are the best choices for midseason award and some of these all-star reserves, man. Hope everybody tunes in and gives us some feedback on this amazing show.
Most definitely, man. So once again, we'd like to thank our man Chris Morrison from the Hoopers Log. Once again, be sure to check out the Hoopers Log, one of the premier podcasts discussing NBA basketball, available on NBALeague.com. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we'll catch up with you next time.